All right, Chelsea fans, welcome back to another episode. That's right, the London is Blue podcast. Hopefully, your favorite Chelsea podcast out there. Dan, one of your hosts here. No Brandon. He's enjoying fatherhood at home at the moment, as we mentioned on the pod earlier this week in the match preview. So you're joined by one Nick Verlaney and from near the grounds at Stamford Bridge, Nizaar Kinsella coming to us hot outside a pub, finding a little bit of respite after a crazy day in West London, where Chelsea did beat Leicester City 4-2 in the FA Cup to advance to the semifinals. Naz, welcome back. And as you enjoy the atmosphere outside Stamford Bridge, it seems like the sun is shining on a day where it really could have been disastrous for the Blues.
Yeah, the sun has come out, guys, after some chaos. It felt like a fever dream watching the game. Just intense emotions. Like, I was sweating. I think all the Chelsea fans were. The intensity of the occasion, I was really feeling it. So yeah, it feels a bit like this early kickoff in England. It's the sun is kind of setting now. I'm outside Six's bar, which is round the corner from Stamford Bridge, and yeah, it's the one place where it's a cricket bar. So there's not that many football fans in here. So it's a bit quieter, it's a bit calmer, and hopefully I can bring you some calm, insightful perspective here out of such an intense emotional occasion.
Well, and Nick, I know that as we get into this one, the expected narrative was off the chart for Chelsea today as it relates to this match where Chelsea started winning, missed a penalty, end up scoring, come out with halftime, look as bleak as ever, and then run into a situation where we have to claw it back after a bit of a chaotic situation at the back. But ultimately, Chelsea do get it done. And I think our listeners gave us some pretty good three-word match reviews here to help us understand exactly how it all went down.
That is right. We're going with El Harry with Chelsea March Madness. If you're crossing over to important sports bubbles for me there, so you're going to make it for sure. Edric with St. Palmer's Day, which I like. Mr. Thurman with Start the Bench. Yikes, a little bit there. Audie with Bench Boost activated. Megan with Chelsea Fluke Foxes. CFC Abu with Adios Mio. Of course, I'm right there with you. Blue Badger with Almost Outfoxed. Ian Chelsea with Wembley. And there were many more three-word match reviews that were sent in. So if you did that and you were feeling the emotion of the day, we appreciate it. We just didn't have 3.5 hours to spend on all the three-word match reviews.
Naz, as you think about your three-word match review from the ground, what did you come up with?
Well, I think it's just kind of touching upon the Chelsea fever dream again. There's just something special about Chelsea. That the intensity, it almost feels like a nightmare, but we got through it, right? Just every game, so emotional. So yeah, Chelsea fever dream.
Yeah, I went with players papered over because some individual performances papered over what could have been a really, really terrible day out. And not every player contributed to that, which we'll get into. Nick, what did you go with?
Self-inflicted nonsense. That is exactly what today was. It was, saw some really good and saw some absolute shambles all in one kind of tight-knit ball. So very interesting.
Well, that is a great way to get us started on this one. Our brief bit of admin. Again, we are a part of the Men in Blazers Media Network. We thank everybody who helps support the podcast, whether it's through Apple 5-star reviews or on Spotify. You can do it there too. You can subscribe on YouTube, which we always appreciate. You hit the bell icon to get notified, hit the like button, and also leave comments in the videos too, because we read those as well. You can sign up for our free weekly newsletter, which is absolutely full steam ahead. Really, really great one last week from Sam talking about these substitutions and the myth of what Poch does and doesn't do with them, which we can dive into in more realistic terms with this match.
Yes.
And then also you could join the conversation free or paid as a part of our Discord. But look, it was Chelsea this past Sunday, March 17th in the FA Cup at Stamford Bridge. Scoreline was Chelsea 4, 4-2 to Leicester City. The goals came in the 13th minute, starting Cucurella with a beautiful assist from Nico Jackson. Cole Palmer gets it done in the 45th +1 with a assist from Raheem Sterling. And then in the 51st minute, a absolute worldie of an own goal from Axel Disasi. But it was Madivi with a Drewsbury Hall assist in the 62nd minute that leveled it all out. But look, Chukwuemeka with a assist from Palmer, a beautiful backheel assist, the 90th +2. And then a 90th +8 Madueke goal off of a Gusto assist that sealed the deal for the Blues. Nick, why don't you run us through the lineup and let us know how it initially started and also highlighting when those subs actually made it onto the pitch?
Yeah, I can't remember if it's a full Robert or if it's a Bob when he doesn't play very well. But Sanchez was back between the sticks, making Superman dives nowhere near the ball. That was very interesting. Malo Gusto, Axel Disasi having a couple of just tremendous moments in this match. Trev Chalba and Marc Cucurella kind of resumed the back four from the Newcastle game. Conor Gallagher and Moises Caicedo play in the midfield. Obviously, Enzo suspended for this one. Cole Palmer, Mykhailo Mudryk, Raheem Sterling, who we will have plenty to talk about, as the kind of front three, and then Nico Jackson playing a single striker up top. Bench and subs, another point of emphasis that we will talk about. Carney Chukwuemeka in the 78th minute, Noni Madueke in the 86th minute, Ben Chilwell in the 90th minute, unused subs, Georgi Petrovic, Thiago Silva, Akeem Pong, Badiashile, Harrison, and Washington.
Well, look, the top line stats, the XG, Chelsea 4.77 to 0.66 for Leicester. The actual scoreline was 4-2. So underperform by Chelsea, extreme overperform thanks to our help for Leicester. And you look at ball possession, Chelsea had 60% to 40% for Leicester. 26 total shots, 8 on target to Leicester's 5-1. That's right, 2 goals off one. One goal off of 1 shot on target. Phenomenal. You had 10 shots off target from Chelsea, 4 for Leicester City. We had 8 blocked shots. We had 7 corner kicks to their 3. We had 0 offside moments, 10 fouls to their 12. We had 0 yellow cards, 0 red cards. So they're 2-1. We had 12 free kicks to their 10, 22 throw-ins to their 8, and 8 goal kicks to their 11. We had 6 big chances, and we missed 3 of them. It was 1 big chance and 1 missed for Leicester City. And then we look at goalkeeper saves, 0 for Chelsea, and then 4 for Leicester City. As you look at the stats, as you look at the overall lineup, Naz, maybe thinking about it when the lineup actually dropped, did you have a sense on what the atmosphere or the attitude was, particularly knowing that some of the players either were coming back off of rehab recently, may not be available, some of the challenges that Pochettino had coming into this match and the fixture, like who he could actually select from?
Yeah, well, I think that it was not a surprise lineup, really. I only thought maybe Chilwell would start instead of Cucurella, but Cucurella was chosen and he sort of did a good job there, didn't he? And then it was just the goalkeepers rotated, but both teams were at full strength, so it was everything for these two teams. It was a massive match, this, FA Cup quarter-final. You could maybe draw Coventry in the next round, and we'll see how that goes after the Man United-Liverpool game, but it was basically a route into the final here, a chance to win silverware. And I saw, Poch, like he always does. I mean, every single round in the Carabao Cup, best team. He rotated some against Leeds, but it was still pretty much his strongest, and he only rotated because Chelsea were knackered at that point. And then, best team here against Leicester, and they needed it. Leicester are a good team. I watch a lot of them, so I know a lot about Leicester, and I thought this is going to be a tough game for Chelsea, and it was, wasn't it? And that's kind of what I got from the lineup. Give Sanchez a go, but this is the best team, and we need to win this game.
And as we look at a one random stat provided by one at London Blue Pod, was that Cole Palmer has 26 goal contributions, all competitions for this season now, which accounts for 22% of Chelsea's total goal contributions on the season, which would be 119 now. It was 117 earlier in the match, when at that point 35% of the goal contributions had come from Cole Palmer and Nico Jackson, which for 2 acquisitions, Nick, feels really, really good to see them in the leading the chart, as it were.
Yeah, the where you would be without Cole Palmer metric, continues to be more and more impressive by the game. He is absolute class. And in a game where there were plenty of players who seemed flustered or didn't have that last moment of quality, he, of course, cool as a cucumber, goal, assist, bam, on to the next round.
Now, since we haven't had to or have not had the privilege because we have not been back over since the start of the season, you've had a chance to watch Cole Palmer now from his start at Chelsea to this point. What are you seeing maybe specifically just with his game and how it's evolved over the last, say maybe, three, 2/3 of a season here?
Well, I think like there's two aspects to it. There's the ability aspect and then there's the mentality aspect. So let's talk about the ability aspect. He's just a guarantee of quality, sort of like calmness in moments of madness. That flick today, that's just calmness in a moment of madness. And then there's sort of his like long range strikes. It's a guarantee. Like he's just got the touch. He's just got the finish. He's just generally is nearly 9 times out of 10, which is unbelievable at this level. It's like what Fabregas used to deliver. Just that sort of guarantee of technique. He's always going to do it. So that's nailed on. But sometimes players, they wobble because of their mentality. But his mentality is really interesting. And I can kind of speak about it from a Manc point of view because he's very Mancunian. He's very northern. He just doesn't give a crap. He just doesn't give a crap. Like, it doesn't scare him because this is just him playing football. He's just casual. It doesn't matter. The pressure just doesn't matter because he's just calm. He doesn't care. He didn't care about playing Man City. It should have been a big narrative. Come get on your back. Many players would struggle with it. And I think that's the unique thing about him compared, especially to the other Chelsea players, is he doesn't care. The other guys do care. And many of the other players that panic in these pressured moments, they're struggling because it's genuinely a lot of pressure. They know the social media, they're going to get hammered. They know that they're playing not just in front of an English audience, a Premier League audience, they're playing in front of the world. And, you get hammered if you make a mistake, if you mess up. So, some of the players have had that and struggled with it. But Palmer doesn't care. If you mock him or make fun of him, doesn't care. And it's giving him the platform to succeed at Chelsea. I think that combining that sort of gift with not caring and then maybe a bit of City, but actually he's better than he was at City because Poch has given him the freedom. Pep didn't give him freedom. Pep made him a robot. He had to do certain things at certain times. At Chelsea, he can do what he wants. He can do the moments of magic, and he's the main man as well. He's proven it. Everyone trusts him. The fans, the players, the manager. Everyone trusts him now. So he's got the ability. He's got the trust, and he doesn't care what you think about him. And it's a pretty great combination. And now he's the main man, and he's got this platform. And Chelsea being rubbish just gives him space, sort of thing. So Chelsea's averageness is giving certain young players space, and he has a lot of space to be the main man. He literally is the number one guy, and there's no doubt about it, is there? In anyone's mind, he is just the main man. So that's Cole Palmer for me in a nutshell.
And Nick, I believe this leads us into your shithouse moment of the match, the end pet that we've got going on here.
Yeah, the back heel was absolute sauce. I think as Naz rightly points out, a moment of madness. There was a lot of intensity, a lot of players flubbing at chances, a lot of miskicked balls. The box became increasingly congested as Chelsea put on the pressure, and it was just a simple, clinical back heel and a very nice finish from Carnes as well to make the winner happen. And I think there are some hilarious moments of the match, like Disasi with a great finish into his own net from about 30 yards out. That was absolutely hilarious. And then Sanchez kissing him on the neck, which I thought was really fascinating as a celebration of that own goal. The Sterling free kick that could still land on Naz if he's not careful. He's out in public, so just watch out. Yep, look up because that thing could come down. Plenty of moments, but I'll give it to Cole on a more serious note.
That's pretty fair, and we'll use that opportunity in between now and when that low Earth orbit satellite makes it back onto terra firma to take our first ad break. When we get back, we'll talk about how Chelsea got it done, but we didn't make it easy. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. So there were individual player performances that really shone in this game, or players that showed up and held themselves accountable, even if the entire team wasn't necessarily up for it or didn't showcase that they were up for it. I mean, if we could look at Malo Gusto, Nico Jackson, and Cole Palmer, we talked about before the break. I think where I'd like to start, though, Naz, is there was this idea that it was a comfortable start for Chelsea going up 1-0, generally finding it almost easy, even though in like the first 8 minutes, Leicester seemed comfortable, seemed willing to press, but Chelsea found their goal, took advantage of a team without Vardy, without most of their senior attackers that they would like to have in this match, and then kind of got undone through their own decisions in the first half where it could have been more decisive.
Well, I guess the other player who won the match was Jackson, really, because he sort of got the man sent off, could have won a penalty, but maybe getting the man sent off was even better in a way. So I think that was massive, wasn't it, for Chelsea? But they were wobbling, and we all know that. And every single Chelsea game is a bit of a lottery. You know, it's kind of like trying to find a way in the madness. But they got it done. The subs got it done as well. They were big, so I thought Jackson, obviously, Palmer, obviously, were match winners, and then obviously Carney was good, and Noni scored the screamer, which was a bit of a putting a gloss on the scoreline, let's be honest, but what a goal, unbelievable. And I guess it showed Chelsea could pull out moments. They do have quality, but it's just bringing it all together and not looking vulnerable, not panicking. That's where they suffer. So I kind of sum up the game like that. You know, they do have moments, they do have quality, but it's not all come together yet, really. I don't think Chelsea, and we're kind of seeing that. And if Chelsea are, you know, they're going to have to play Man City, Liverpool, probably in the future in these games. So if they are to win those kind of games, they're going to have to pull it together a little bit more. Although Man United have just scored as I speak. I heard a cheer from the Sixes pub. So yeah, maybe that will make things easier for Chelsea as well if United do knock out Liverpool. But yeah, that Chelsea need to lift the level a little bit. But overall, there were some match winners, weren't there? And I'd pick out those four players: Carney, Noni, Jackson, and Cole Palmer.
Well, it's Dan. It's these three players again. You know, we talked about this on Monday. We've talked about this over the last month, I would say, more consistently. Malo Gusto is an incredible player. So much skill, offers so much going forward. Is really starting to come into his own, and I think is a player that without him we would be really struggling offensively. Nico Jackson, who I think continues to get better every game because he is showing a lot of different aspects of his game, but he's making so many runs that help Chelsea open up space in behind. And Cole Palmer, who is the embodiment of cool, calm, and collected, right? This is a guy who just does the business, and they're all putting up results. They're all putting up numbers. Like, these are guys who, regardless of the situation, whether it's against the championship Leicester side or against Newcastle or, you know, it's against Man City, are all showing up in big ways where, you know, some of the other players simply aren't doing that. And, you know, you look at this match in particular, kind of a weird one in the fact that Chelsea were comfortable for a lot of the first half, even without playing brilliantly. And this is still, you know, these are still the three guys that we're looking at the end of the day going, without them, we wouldn't advance.
And there were some interesting ways of setting up because, you know, obviously with no Enzo in this match, it means that you get the addition of Mudryk with Sterling and Palmer as a part of the attacking quad with Jackson as well. And that changed things a little bit where you now had Sterling almost directly behind Nico Jackson. But Nico there was a lot of movement across that front line. You would see Nico on the right hand side. You would see Sterling on the left. You would see Mudryk running from the left channel centrally. And it felt like in the first part of the match, Naz, the idea was really to try to beat him with pace, to move as quickly as possible, to get in behind their line and try to create a one-on-one opportunity for the attacker to get a shot off, to make something happen. And it felt like, actually, outside of the individual struggles, that the initial game plan, the thesis of what Pochettino was trying to accomplish with the players was the right game plan. It just wasn't fully executing in some of the combinations that we were seeing.
Yeah, it did work, right? I think they created chances. First half was good. Chelsea were pretty, they created a lot. I think Leicester created a bit, but Chelsea created more. I think if the match carried on like the entire first half, it would have been a comfortable win for me. So yeah, it worked, and I think Mudryk had shots on goal. Sterling should have scored his thing. His chance, penalty miss as well. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of good moments. It kind of worked. Those quick plays you mentioned were right up against the Leicester sort of back line, and then Cole Palmer dropping into sort of he was playing off the right, but he was kind of dropping deeper, and like he was the one setting off the attacks, maybe arriving in the box a bit later. So that was kind of how it works usually with Chelsea with these quick sort of forwards, and then Palmer's the deeper one. So yeah, it kind of worked. Obviously Leicester caused some problems, but I thought first half Chelsea, that's a good blueprint for Chelsea, but as soon as the nerves set in, then anything can happen again, can't they? And that's the problem. Therein lies the problem. The game plan, it sort of makes sense with the players Chelsea's got, but there's a sort of like madness element that will always creep in with Chelsea a little bit when problems arise, which they always do in football matches.
It definitely feels like a plan is good, execution is questionable for Chelsea is the way that we can read that situation. I think what was interesting, and this is when the ground bleeds over into the way we're observing the game or way we're watching the game at home, there are not many times where I can recollect that I heard audible boos coming through the broadcast as related to a player's performance getting booed off of the pitch at Stamford Bridge. And I think we'd be remiss after showering some players with individual praise to not talk about what was a really Jekyll and Hyde performance from Raheem Sterling in this one. Naz, at the ground, watching it live, and then seeing the timeline of reaction, the miss, the assist, the penalty situation, like it really had everything that a performance could ask for. Some of it not great, but it definitely ran the
Yeah.
gamut of emotions.
Yeah, definitely. I felt like Raheem Sterling's situation, we have to address it. So let's first and foremost say Raheem Sterling was very poor today. It wasn't his day. It was one of his worst performances of the season. I think he's actually been okay this season, but obviously been very frustrating, wasteful a bit in front of goal. You get that a bit with Sterling. He is wasteful. He needs a lot of chances to get his goals, but he's a pretty solid performer tactically. I think that's why managers always pick him. But yeah, going back to today, the reaction to him was interesting. I mean, he kind of, I don't think Stamford Bridge has been having him for weeks, and like you say, Dan, it's kind of like when it spills over to the broadcast, the boos are loud, but when you're in the stadium, you can hear the boos like even a little bit. They've been building and building and building for weeks and weeks and weeks, and I've been like, Chelsea fans are not having Sterling. I mean, you see it on social media, that's one thing, right? But when it's in the stadium, that's when fans actually affect players, so it's like negative. It feeds off him. He looks under pressure. I almost think his one-on-one miss is down to the reaction of Chelsea supporters. I think that's causing him to decline in performances. You look at the way he missed that chance, the one-on-one with Leicester's goalie. He actually overhit it. It was miles wide. He was really trying to place it with power, and it's just like, mate, you just scuff it underneath him, just curl it more gently. It's an easy chance, but he really tried to hammer it home, and I feel like that's a response to the pressure that he's under, especially after missing the penalty. And then great assist. It's actually a brilliant assist that for Palmer. Let's not take that away, but generally poor performance. It ends with him skying a free kick. The fans boo Pochettino because they sub Mudryk. And when I was I sit right next to the bench at Stamford Bridge, and the fans next to the bench, they were cheering Mudryk to a ridiculous level, like standing ovation, just to make even more of a point to Poch that they wanted Mudryk to stay on and they wanted Sterling off. It was just like, it was really negative, to be honest, reaction to Sterling, and it is worrying. It's a bit self-destructive for me. This is a player who is going to stick around at Chelsea. Like the rumours about him moving to Saudi, he doesn't want to go to Saudi, and it's very hard for me to see him joining a Premier League rival. And he's not going to join another big club, I don't think. So I think he's at Chelsea now for at least another year, and I think Chelsea supporters should be trying to drive him on, but they're just not having him. And it's interesting to see what happens now because he's getting this negative response. Can he turn around the fans? What will it take to turn around the fans? Obviously, goals, better performances, and stuff like that. But he's kind of the fallback guy, and I think he gets beaten a lot with the wages. 300 grand a week he's on, and that's usually the negative about Sterling. We want more for our 300 grand a week, but it's not his fault he's on 300 grand a week. Just like it's not Moises Caicedo's fault he's a 115 million pound player, or it's not Enzo Fernandez's fault he cost 107 million pound. That's not these guys' fault. It's just the situation. So for me, that's how I feel about it. But the top and bottom of it is Sterling is poor. Chelsea fans are not having him. It doesn't matter what I think, really, about the whole thing. But that's the situation. Is Chelsea fans aren't having him. Sterling is poor. He's generally been okay for me. Probably in the top 5 or 6 players of Chelsea. Not one of the best. Nowhere near Palmer, obviously. But he's been okay this season. So, yeah, it's interesting. And maybe the fans just want Mudryk in the team. And it's interesting to see if Mudryk can take that place longer term, actually. How Pochettino reacts to Sterling. Can he protect him? Can he help him? Can other players help him maybe? Say some nice things about him. I interviewed Carney Chukwuemeka after the game, and he loves Sterling. He says he's my big brother. So we've got a lot of this sort of stuff going on, and it's going to be interesting to see how it all works out, really.
Here's my issue. And I know, Naz, that footballers are people, and people are impacted by all sorts of things, and I think that that's a fair enough point. However, this was a comical performance. I think you gave a generous 4 in your player ratings today, and that is a generous 4. I think he was a 1 for me, only bailed out from being a 0 by the assist. For a guy of his experience, taking the penalty from Cole Palmer when Cole Palmer is clearly the designated penalty taker, stupid and wrong and immature. The fact that he's calling off Cole Palmer from a set piece where he blasts it into orbit, clearly not having a great day, should be looking for other players to support him and get forward. He's not playing
but
like
second.
He's not playing like a mature player, though, Naz. Come on.
Sorry to interrupt you. I just wanted to correct one thing. Is that the penalty situation? That's actually Pochettino's fault, really, if you're honest, because Pochettino's never given a designated penalty taker. It's just Palmer by sort of without being. It's not been designated. It's just Palmer, just because Palmer's good at penalties, but Pochettino leaves it open to the players to decide on the pitch, and it's created this situation. Obviously, I agree with you. Palmer should take penalties. He's better at penalties than Sterling. For me, I totally agree with you. But the situation is the management's fault a bit, because, if you got one great penalty taker, make it that guy. But there's a lot of clubs now, and Chelsea are one of those, which have no designated penalty taker. Players decide for themselves. Enzo Fernandez is in the penalty taker group, by the way. He could maybe take one if he was on the pitch. So Chelsea have created this situation. Man United have the same thing, by the way. They had Bruno Fernandes and Rashford took penalties in the same game the other day, despite both being on the pitch. So, this is the situation. Palmer was about to take it if that Jackson penalty, which ended up being outside the box, was going to be given because the players decide on the pitch. But it's that uncertainty is created from the coaching staff, which have this policy. I don't really agree with it, but that's their policy and not Sterling's fault in a way. And he's been kind enough to let Palmer take it for a while. And he's thought, I want to add another goal to my, everyone backs himself, right? And he's wanted to add a goal to his repertoire, and he's missed. So that's what's happened.
So fair enough, whatever. It's Poch's fault, but Palmer has taken the penalties when Sterling's been on the pitch all season, right? This is not like a new thing. This shouldn't have been a new invention. To me, this is a player who is not clearly loved universally by Chelsea fans, who has performed admirably at times, and then this is the worst player performance of the season for me. And that's with Batty. Dan and I were talking before the match review that we've had some stinker performances. Chilwell's had a couple of really bad performances. Batty Shields had a couple of bad performances. Enzo is a player I think has had some bad performances this year. Mudryk has clearly not kicked on in different ways. I think this is the worst player performance of the year. And I understand as a team, this is the other thing that a lot of people need to understand is as a team, they should all want Sterling to be a lot better. They should all help him get better. That is the whole purpose of having a team and not leaving some guy out on an island just to get booed every game. but he also has to take that responsibility on. And I think that's part of the frustration is a lot of Chelsea fans, Dan, don't see him doing that in a way that a real leader should. Like we heard when he first came to Chelsea that he had great leadership abilities, that he was, third in line for the England captaincy, all this sort of stuff. And we're not seeing that from him.
It definitely read as a me over team type of situation. Watching it on broadcast when you see someone,
I need a goal
again, who did win the penalty, right? Fair. So there are times when someone who wins it likes to take it if they're an attacker. So we have seen that before. I mean, career wise, Cole Palmer has made, is 5 for 5 this season across all competitions. I mean, he has made more than Raheem Sterling has his entire professional playing career. Like, that is just the way to look at it from like a stats perspective. Like, he's 3 for 7 across the entire history of his club soccer career. Like, that is to me enough to say, like, look, yes, I would like the goal. Yes, it is helpful for me to potentially, for my Euro case, or for getting back into a scoring rhythm within the team. But ultimately, the best thing for all of us, the best thing for all of Chelsea, is for Chelsea to get to another cup final, to win domestic silverware, to get back into Europe. And the FA Cup right now represents the maximum amount of hope and potential that Chelsea could have to do all of those things this season. And I think that's where a lot of the criticism comes from, is that there was a jeopardy in that moment of choosing that and making that decision actively versus saying, I'm going to do the unselfish thing and allow the person who's been perfect for us this season to go ahead and take the opportunity to do so.
This is also coming off the back, Naz, and I think this is a fair enough point as well. There have been 4 or 5 instances this year where if Sterling squares the ball to an open player, you have a goal. And there have been screenshots shared around. I'm sure you've seen them and can remember them. Like, I am all for a player in form. I'm all for a selfish striker. I want a striker to rip as many shots on goal. But there are just clear moments in football where making the extra pass is the right thing to do for the team. It's the right thing to do for individual play. It's like, some players love assists more than goals because, it's a harder thing to do. Like, it's that sort of stuff that, like, a player of his caliber and experience, we shouldn't be having conversations over.
Maybe you're right, Nick. And Dan's just laid off some unbelievable stats on this pod, by the way. Bloody hell! But yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right. In terms of him, maybe it's sort of a psychological thing. Maybe he should be honest with himself that he's not the best ball striker. He should take the easy option. Those simple passes when you're 1-on-1. You've got another guy with you, just square it. But I do think he's kind of like a positive influence around the place. He's had some bad games this season, but he's not been one of the worst by any means. And I think that there's like almost, I think there's just Chelsea fans aren't fancying him. Sometimes people just don't like players, and it can happen. Sometimes they don't identify with the club. I think he could do more to speak to the fans. He's supposed to be one of the experienced players. If he did interviews after bad games, just talking, like saying we were rubbish today, fans got to know him. He's a bit of an enigma. I think that's also a bit against him. He needs to try and communicate with fans. He needs to be, he's 29 now. He's an England international. He's played more caps than almost anyone in that squad. He needs to be like the guy that comes out, being a bit more like Gallagher. Gallagher's wearing the armband today. Sterling isn't. But Sterling needs to bring a bit of that leadership onto the pitch. He needs to show people what he kind of does behind the scenes. But I think that fans don't understand it, not seeing it. They're not seeing great performances, a bit disappointed. And I think there's also a clamour for Mudryk as well, isn't there? A bit more of him to play, see what he can do. He looks good in moments. He's getting goals as well, Mudryk, now, so it's putting even more pressure on him. And Noni getting goals as well. I think there's a lot of things against Sterling. It's really interesting, the whole thing, but I think that Chelsea fans and Sterling are gonna have to stick together with each other for a bit longer. And you kind of like, sometimes you don't love that person in your family, but you kind of learn how to be around them, right? And maybe that's what Chelsea need to do in this situation. There's got to be a pragmatic element to it where, fans and player move forward in the right direction. I think that's going to be interesting to see if that can happen. I don't think there's going to be a Saudi Bowley mastermind transfer, I think it's going to be, he's going to be here next season. So it's going to be interesting to see if he can turn it around in any way, even if there's not the performances or whatever to go with it.
Well, in terms of trying to protect the player, Pochettino after the match did have a quote on Sterling being booed saying, "The feelings weren't good for him, but I'm going to support him. He has an unbelievable CV. He's played for big teams and is an experienced player. Today he missed a penalty and some chances, but we are going to support him," which I think speaks to your point, Naz, that Pochettino is going to try to, where he can, build a bridge between the supporters and the player to turn the tide a little bit in his favor. But look, there are a couple other things we want to get into, including Pochettino substitutions, the crazy own goal, and so much more. So stay tuned. We'll be right back after our final ad break. All right. So the other thing, and you made a comment here about it, Naz, so I think we should jump into it. It was the Mikhailo Mudryk being the first player being subbed off in the 78th minute, and the subs coming after a point in time where Chelsea looked under siege at the start of the second half, had conceded then the second goal already, and there had been no change, no movement to try and avert disaster before it started. We've seen these moments in Chelsea matches recently. Is your general sense that you feel like Pochettino waits too long to make a substitution when the game state is changing? Is it about the amount of trust he has in the players in the pitch to figure it out? Or does he not feel that the bench is deep enough to go earlier to the bench sooner, or go to the bench sooner to try to make an adjustment?
Yeah, I think it's the last one. I think it's the latter. I think that's the biggest thing. Like, I don't think he feels like he has the options on the bench. I think in the press conference today, he came out with a program and he said he was quite frustrated because on the English broadcast of the game, there was a comment that Chelsea had a massive squad and should be beating Leicester easily. And he found out about it, brought out the Chelsea program. It had a massive list of players, and he went, "Look at this list. Like, we might have a big squad, but these are all youth players. These are all injured, and these are all I've got available." And the only three subs he used were Chilwell, obviously Carney, and Noni Madueke. So three experienced players, but not Chukwuemeka. Sorry, he's a very young guy, isn't he? So, and a lot of them have been injured as well recently. Chilwell just back from injury, so he's kind of making the point that, look, I wait a long time. We don't have a big squad. I've got what I've got. It's that kind of thing, He's trying to speak to fans to tell them that's his perspective. Whether you agree with that or not, whether you think Poch should be beating Leicester easier or lower Premier League teams easier, then that's another debate. But he's saying that it's not easy. Like, what we've got is what we've got, and I think that's why. And Chelsea, let's be honest, Chelsea's subs have been really poor this season. Like, there's been very few times when a sub has won the game. Chelsea, I know it's happened a few times lately. I know Noni's done it. A few of them have done it, but it's quite rare, actually. It's quite poor when you compare it to, like, Liverpool, when you compare it to, like, Man City, obviously. Most, even, like, your Spurses and stuff. Like, it just doesn't happen that often with Chelsea. So, yeah, it's been poor, and I don't know if that's all Poch's fault, but he doesn't feel like he has depth. And I think even, like, bringing Cassidy back, it was an idea that he might be able to get goals from the bench, because Chelsea just lack goals in general. The guys they've got on the pitch are the guys they think will score the most goals generally, and then they've got the guys on the bench who they don't think will score goals. So, chasing games is not Chelsea's forte in general. But today it worked, obviously. I think Carney's been the one who generally makes an impact from the bench, and I'm sure you guys agree. We've seen that a few times this season. For his injuries, he's done very well, and I'm actually blown away by the impact he's had in such short minutes. But still, he's not been available a lot, barely been available, and he's had really bad injury problems, and it's been a real issue for Chelsea. But Carney's done well, but yeah, Poch's mediocrity with subs, I think he would say it's because I just don't have the options.
Can I just make a point here? And I put this out on Twitter, and it got some love and some mixed emotions as well. But like today, and there have been a few times this season where I felt this way. It feels like this Chelsea car is driving down the road, and Poch has felt like a passenger in terms of like when to change stuff, when he is the person at the wheel. And, when Chelsea were in the skid and it's 2-2 and we made a critical error and then gave up a goal right after that, he was just kind of sat there and like wasn't even like really talking to his assistants or anything. It just felt like he was like watching events unfold instead of trying to command the events. Of course, there have been other times where that isn't the case. So I'm not saying this is like every moment of every game, but like today in particular, it just felt like we were waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. And then it finally, a change happens. And it's not even the change that people thought was the right change to happen at that moment. Right. So, what are your thoughts on that, Naz? Because that is the sense that I'm getting right now. It's like, despite maybe him not feeling like he has the options that he wants or whatever, surely there has to be a recognition that things aren't going well at that point, right? Like you can change.
Yeah, I think that you're right in a way, but I think like maybe he felt like, like Chilwell maybe has a certain amount of minutes. What if we get to extra time? I think he's more attacking fullback than Cucurella, even though he scored. It was an unusual thing to see Cucurella get his first goal, by the way. So that could have been an option. Noni, there's probably a question mark about him defensively. Carney, how fit is he? How many minutes can he play if you go to extra time? Is it going to cause problems? Like, I even think Mudryk might have come off. He doesn't finish games, Mudryk. Like, if you look at his track record, he's finished like 2 or 3 90 minutes across his entire Chelsea career. And it's the same with Shakhtar, and it's the same with Ukraine, by the way. It's not just Chelsea. So that might be like, there's a fitness issue there. Like, he's fast, he's strong, he's a great trainer, Mudryk, but for some reason he runs out of gas all the time. So, there's all these things going on. And the youth of the players as well means that they're not conditioned. That's part of the injury puzzle for Chelsea, is that these guys aren't used to the Premier League. They aren't used to the intensity 3 days a week at this level. Like there's loads of these kind of issues that Poch is dealing with, Chelsea are dealing with. And I think that that's part of and I totally get it. Fans should be critical of Pochettino. He's probably not done good enough. Like, to be below Wolves in the league is unbelievable to me. Really poor. No matter what's wrong, like, that's not good enough, right? But yeah, I think there's certain things where I'd be like, subs, I kind of like can see the limitations, right? And I know there's been a bit of debate. Why don't they go to youth players? That's probably a fair criticism too. Maybe there is a youth player. Maybe Tyreek George could do a moment, and he's not done that. But I think there's just too much chaos for him to bring people up. Like, City can bring through a youth player because a lot of the other pieces are in place, right? So if they've got problems in one area, they bring it in. But he's just got problems across the board that he's constantly managing. And I think that's what Chelsea's issue is. It's just like, you're just spinning plates until the next problem arises all the time. And I think there needs to be a point when it settles in and he can start building. But he's not. He's sort of like, Chelsea just outrunning the problems constantly. And that's why we've got the feeling we had at Stamford Bridge.
It's the seesaw of it's a problem or an excuse, and trying to figure out the balance of the reality of the situation, which is somewhere in the middle. That yes, he might not have all the players available. Yes, he may have more options than he would like to consider, or may need to think a little bit more broad in his decision around who could be a solution, who could be the one youth player down that he does want to trust, does want to invest in to try to be a part of the solution, particularly if there are players like Cassidy who comes back and can't play in the FA Cup because he was involved with Leicester's run. If there are players who are not available, like Nkunku now for additional weeks, or players who are only working themselves back into fitness. And I think that's maybe where the frustration comes from. However, at the end of the day, it worked out today. And like, that is the thing that he can hang his hat on, is that like, even if you're critical of the substitutions I've made, even if you're not happy with when I made them, we got the win at the end of it. And like, that was the primary objective, was to advance out of this round. It wasn't easy. I think it's about how many lessons does he take from this? How does he tinker with the team moving forward to put Chelsea in the best position possible to go into the next round, whomever we play, and advance? Because advancing is the only last objective of the season for me at this moment. And I think for Chelsea supporters at this moment, because it would be the type of thing where it does give Chelsea a road nick back into Europe, gives us an opportunity to potentially claim we won a trophy in a year where we were absolutely terrible for the most of it. And for 2 years running, like, that is a very good potential end of this season, even if the league form has been objectively terrible.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking a lot of critical stuff in this pod, and I think that's largely because we've watched this team this year. Like, this isn't like a one-off. Chelsea were just rascals today, and they just, they gave themselves a hard time, but like typically it's not like this is how we have been this year. And I think this is the buildup and the frustration is because this is a consistent theme. We make it harder on ourselves than it should be. We don't do some of the easy things. We don't have available players and so on and so on and so on. And I think advancing is great. Obviously, every point that you just made there is the right point. Obviously Chelsea could potentially get lucky or unlucky with how the draw goes next, and we'll see. But, it is another game at Wembley. So, that's not a bad thing. Maybe you go on a lucky run and catch City on a bad moment or where they're focused on the Champions League or something like that. And maybe you get one over on them. But it's, I think the consistency or lack thereof of the performances means that even as you advance, the confidence isn't high that you're going to actually finish the job. And for Chelsea, I think to finish a job in the FA Cup, Naz, is going to be you're going to have to play one of the good teams at some point, right? So even if you get a favorable draw in the next round, you're going to have to really show up and beat somebody to win the cup. And I think that's where the frustration lies.
Yeah, I guess it's just buying time, right? So Chelsea bought themselves time until April. Always when they get through a cup round, you're just like, it gives Poch time. It gives the players a bit less pressure. And it's always just like, it's not very good in this individual moment, even when they get through the round. But you're like, at least it gives them time to try and get better. So it gives them a few weeks. Like if they have a bad league performance, you're like, well, the cup's still there. You know what I mean? So I think that's sort of how I see it. And I think that's actually sort of how some people at the club see it as well. It's almost living hand to mouth. You're kind of waiting for things to come together. It gives Poch time. He needs it, obviously. The young players, many of them need it. We're talking about bad performances here. Many of them need time. Maybe Sterling needs time to convince fans. So you're just hoping that it comes together. But it's been like this all season, right? And it hasn't come together yet. We'll see. And we'll see where we end up at the end of the year. But look, silverware is still available. European qualification is still available. Like the league position is terrible, but actually they're not that far away from some of the European clubs. And also there's 5 European places available for the Champions League, but that extends down. So 8th is Conference League, potentially 7th is Europa League. So can Chelsea finish 7th? Possibly. They need to win some games, some hard games as well as easy games. But it's all to play for still a little bit.
Naz, this is my general point about the where could we be comments, right? Like clearly Chelsea and even with the injuries have more talent than some of the teams that are above them in the table, could be in a better position. But Chelsea have not put 2 good performances together all season back to back. And to get up into those spaces, you're going to have to put 3 or 4 good performances together to really start to claw back points, especially against the teams that are above you in the table. And we play United coming up in a couple of weeks. Like these are the sorts of things that drive me nuts because, if Chelsea put together a run, there's no doubt they'll be back in Europe because it's just the maths on that front. Like you have teams that are above you in the table that you would just leapfrog. Like it just makes sense, but Chelsea haven't done that. So you can't the expectation that Chelsea will be 7th just because of magic, it doesn't make sense to me. Like they have to actually go out and do it, and they haven't done it yet.
Yeah, and don't forget, Chelsea do have good days, but it's inconsistency that's a problem, and that's the youthfulness and stuff. And to do anything in the league, you need a bit of consistency. And we're not talking about a high level of consistency because to qualify for the Conference League is not a high level of consistency. And Europa League, it's not a higher standard. We're not talking anywhere near Man City, Arsenal levels. We're not talking even maybe Spurs levels here. We're talking Brighton levels, and that's what I get. That Chelsea fans are frustrated. But yeah, you're right. I think that they need to get into a position where they can win 3 league games in a row, and that's just Chelsea just not in that position. They just haven't been in. And that will get them into Europe if they can win 3 league games in a row, then draw one. Maybe it changes the picture, but you just don't believe in it, do you? Because you haven't seen it for so long. And this squad of players haven't seen it. They've not played in a team, an English Premier League team, that has done that, apart from Sterling and Palmer, who did that at Man City. But generally, these guys haven't done that before. So, I think that's where everyone's a bit, clueless about what's going to happen. I showed up to the game today thinking anything can happen here. And watching the game, and anything did happen, and Chelsea got over the line, yes, but you play that game out, 5 times, and Leicester win it 2 times, I think. So it's the same with the Leeds game, and Chelsea got on the right side of things in the cup, some favourable draws as well. Let's be honest, but to do anything in the league, you need consistency. You need an underlying level of performance that's very good, and it's not quite good enough now. And that's the frustration. I get that. Chelsea fans are rightly frustrated with that, but I'd say there's a lot of things going on more than just the manager. Yes, the manager is probably partly to blame, but there's many other problems as well at Chelsea that are causing this inconsistency.
Well, Chelsea will need to raise the floor of their performances, not just in the league, but also in the FA Cup as they now advance and look forward to who they will get a chance to play next. At time of recording, Liverpool in extra time have gone ahead 3-2. So we don't necessarily know, but it looks more likely than not that Liverpool will make it to another semifinal in a cup. And maybe that's the secret for Chelsea. We don't need to face them in a final. Let's face them in the semifinal round. And then we have to beat somebody in a final that isn't them. And we can actually go ahead and win a domestic cup in the recent memory or future as that situation. We did do a Dan the Match poll. Cole Palmer ran away with it at 78.2%. Some people told me I should put Gusto in there. A couple people, maybe bots or farming applications here, were saying I should put Sterling in it. That was never happening. Nico Jackson had 14%. Chukwuemeka had 4%, and Kukurea had 4%. But as we look ahead, it is the option of Coventry, it's the option of Man City, or potentially Liverpool/United for the next round competition. I don't think we have a preference necessarily because you're going to have to beat everybody, Nick. And we've shown that just because you're a big side or a small side doesn't mean we're going to have an easy day out.
No, I mean, I don't think the draw will continue to be favorable to us, just being very honest about that. But I do think this is an opportunity for Chelsea to start to put away the Wembley bad vibes that exist right now. That wasn't the case for the longest time. Chelsea have not performed well at Wembley for a long time. I would love to see us go out and perform well at Wembley in the semifinal, and really start to put a string of performances together once we get to that point, so that we end up confident in that match. But TBD on if that will happen.
Well, we are about to wrap this one, but we want to say thank you to Naz, who joined us from outside or near Stamford Bridge, pint in hand. Beautiful sky there, wonderful weather. I did hear some seagulls in the background at some point, or some gulls, so maybe Brighton conversations happening around Stamford Bridge with a Chelsea executive. That might have been the case. So we appreciate you making the time to join us today.
Yeah, I hope the ambience was quite added a lot to the pod, guys. I hope you felt the sort of general atmosphere of being sat outside Stamford Bridge. It's we don't usually do this, do we? Usually I'm in my home or somewhere secure and quiet, but we managed it. We got through it.
Just like Chelsea did. We got through it on this one, but that's going to do it for this one. So until next time, Chelsea fans, plenty of content coming your way, but you know what to do. Keep the blue flag flying high.